Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm Clarissa Rios Rojas, a researcher at the Center for the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge, and thanks to Mr. Kazuhiro Nakai, chair of the MX2, and Daniel Fix, head of the Biological Weapon Convention, I'm here to share with you some ideas on how we can enhance and support the magnificent work that the BWC is doing. Let me guide you through this 10 minutes presentation. We have been witnesses of a technological boom in human genomics. You may have remembered the news about the CRISPR babies that were edited in China and they were born with a modification in one of their genes. We have also seen the rising of many companies that are offering gene therapy, as you can see there in the news of gene-based medicines. And we have also seen a lot of businesses that are offering genetic testing to citizens like you and me. For example, you may have heard about the companies that are offering to tell you where you come from geographically and ethnically. And now we also see companies that even offer you to match your DNA to the DNA of a football player to see what's the similarity between your genomes or between your genes. And you can see there like Rio Ferdinand's DNA Fit Academy, for example. And 23andMe as well are one of the many companies that are offering this genetic testing. And we have seen that the news have popped up saying that they have been doing some deals with pharmaceutical companies selling these DNA databases to them in order to improve their genetic experiments and research at these huge pharmaceutical companies. We have also seen a lot of companies producing synthetic DNA, for example, and they are offering this as a way to improve medicine and drugs, that is medicines for people and for curing some diseases. And in all this world, we have seen also that, for example, in the world of cryptocurrency, nowadays you can go to there and you can sell your DNA, as you can see in encrypting the DNA marketplace. You can go and directly sell your DNA through these platforms and you get DNA tokens. We have also seen the merging of different technologies together, as it is artificial intelligence pairing with research that we are doing in pharmaceuticals. And you can use now AI for drug discovery, as you can see there. And also we have seen the rising of different communities that are working on human genomics and human editing. For example, the do-it-yourself biology. Now they have YouTube channels and communities where they gather together, and some of them are even performing genetic engineering experiments, CRISPR, in themselves, as you can see in that YouTube video where they are saying about how to enhance yourself and how to, for example, put fluorescence on your pets. And this may be very entertaining and interesting and an opportunity for development, but it also raises a lot of risks because, for example, genetic engineering experiments should be performed by people that has been trained on this and has follow ethical procedures in understanding what's the risk and what is the biosafety protocols that they have to fill up when we are talking about this type of experiments. However, this is the world where we are living now, and we are being bombarded by all this information, and it's important for not just the BWC, but for all citizens and academics and private companies to know about what are the risks and what could be the dual concerns that we may have. And talking about dual use research of concern, I want to raise the question to you. Do you think that any of these technologies can be used for creating a bioweapon? And this is something that we must be thinking continuously because, as we know, we want to create scientific advancements and technology to improve the life of humans and of the environment. But could it be possible that this can be also be used for some other dark aims? And we have to be thinking who is doing that, who should be controlling this, and what's our personal role during this issue. So some of the things that I would like to share with you are some ideas that we, for example, are using in our own center in order to think about the future and think about threats and catastrophic events that can lead humanity to collapse. And one of them is the use of methods of foresight. Foresight is the ability to predict what will happen or what we will need to do in order to prevent disastrous futures. So in this case, for example, in our center, we use foresight approaches to explore possible future scenarios, technologies, and societal trends, their drivers as well, to understand what are these weak signals, what's gonna drive this to go faster or slower, their interactions between them, and also the potential consequences. And this is a method that really makes us think about what's a technology, what can happen in the future, and what do we need to do now in order to prevent an undesirable future. For example, here I want to talk about one scientific article that we produced that is Bioengineering Horizon Scan, where we are talking about what are the bioengineering issues that are going to be relevant and very important in 5 to 15 years. And this is performed using Foresight and horizon scanning. The second image that you see, a diagram with a lot of arrows connecting between each other, it's an exercise that we did with a think tank where we were training academics and also people working as civil servants in the methods of foresight, thinking about environmental breakdown and climate change and what are the consequences and what are the drivers. And this was a very successful workshops where we could really engage our participants and to think about what can they do from their own institutions, governments, in order to prevent this future. The second thing that I would like to also bring up to you into the discussion is like, how can we synchronize the work being performed at the BWC with other international agreements? During the last years, we have seen that for example, the Sendai framework has emerged, which is a framework for discussing and monitoring risk. And as the BWC, there are many countries that have signed for that agreement. We also have the Sustainable Development Goals. We have the Paris Agreement, the COPs that are happening every year. So it will be good if there is a committee or a group of experts that can sit down and start extrapolating what's the knowledge that is being produced by every single group and agreement, and how we can align all our goals and objectives together if there are some points of similarity. The other thing that I would like to say to policymakers and to civil servants that are perhaps looking at me and my presentation today is that you have to please look at the scientific community as allies. What research is being conducted locally and how it can support the efforts of the BWC in your own country. So I think that we are still very disconnected with from both sides, from policymakers to know what's being produced at their own universities at home, and then use that knowledge in order to produce evidence that can help them to produce better reforms or better policies. And on the other side, we are also from the academia very disconnected with what's happening in our regional or national context. So we need a bi-directional communication. And for that, for example, from our own fronts, as a scientist, I will say that our research institutions perhaps should invite representatives from the BWC to talk about their needs in order to find bridge of collaboration. And in the same way, you could also maybe invite some experts in biosafety or biosecurity to your meetings, and then just ask them about things or express like what are your concerns and what are your needs of research. As I mentioned before, we have the do-it-yourself biology community growing everywhere in the world. They have, because all the materials and because all the equipment that you need to perform genetic experiments has been reduced, the cost has been reduced during the last years. These communities have risen with the will to learn more about how to do biological experiments and to learn more about the secrets of the world, let's say. So I think it's very important to embrace these communities because there is a lot of potential for good. And in case that there is some dark shades that can be prevented, that can be prevented only if there is a good communication between the government, and these communities. So for that, I think it will be really good if the BWC or the local governments can offer capacity building workshops in biosecurity to these communities to promote training in biosafety and to promote relations between the local team working on the risk of bioweapons in case that an accident happens. So if we can strengthen these collaborations and this communication, it will be really good to prevent disasters in the future. And the other thing that I find very interesting, not only at the BWC, but also at my work, is that we need to learn from best practices. We need to open spaces where we can share about what has worked in my country, which policies have helped us to move forward. And I think that we need to strengthen this capacity building so that other countries, especially low-income countries, can also initiate their own biosafety activities without having to commit too many resources, because they are not starting from zero, but they are starting already from where you left off. And I think that's really important. We also have to think about the interface of science and policy making. This concept is new as well, but it has been evolving already so fast that when we talk about improving this interface, what we really want to say is that we don't have to invite policymakers at the very end of our research. What we need to do is to involve them since the very beginning. And that's why we want to promote the co-design, the co-production, and the co-delivery of knowledge. In this way, when scientists and academics incorporate these allies since the very beginning, our allies can know what we are doing, and then they can contribute with their feedback and with their ideas and with their experience on the field, because they work hands on them, and we can improve and make a better design of our research initiatives. And I think that's also good, because once your product is finalized, you know that it's going to have an applied realm where you can test if what you have been researching really works in the real world, let's say. And I think that's really important to think about these three goals for both, for policymakers, for academics, but also for citizens and also for the private companies to be involved. And that, of course, brings me to my next point, which is thinking about citizen engagement. And this means to incorporate the voice of citizens, not only in the policymaking process and the policy cycle, but also in the academic world, because that means that we need, as one good friend of mine told me, we need to look at the stories behind the data, because it gives a direction and it gives us purpose in order to conduct a better study, a scientific study, and then also to policymakers to know that there are real stories behind everything, that all the numbers and the statistics that we receive, and also to improve our policy making decisions, because sometimes we are so detached of what's happening in the real world, where people, for example, has to go 3 hours to look for water, or where people doesn't have a refrigerator at home. But then we introduce policies where people cannot go out to, for example, for the pandemics, to not to go out to buy things, and for many days. So this is something very important that we have to think, and there are very excellent examples. For example, on the topic of climate change, we have at the JRC, at the Joint Research Center, we have Angela Pereira working with indigenous communities in the Arctic that can tell from the field, from where their home is, how they perceive climate change happening, what are their ideas for climate change to be solved, and how they can contribute from their side. And I think that's the most interesting and example that I can think of at the moment. And I'm sure that there are many examples like that. So let's involve citizens in our conversations and discussions. And finally, my last point will be to really look for innovative ways to engage with policymakers, with the industry, with citizens, because it feels sometimes that we live in a competition for attention. And if we do not evolve with the rest of competitors, it will be very difficult to bring our message to them. And here I have just some examples of how perhaps we can innovate in communication. I really enjoy using the strategic intelligence maps of the World Economic Forum that you can see on the first figure, where you click on an issue and then it brings you up, it branches out into more issues, and then you have on the right many articles, scientific articles or news linked to that topic. That's a good way for knowledge management, for example, if we have a very big platform or very big quantities of data and information. The other thing also from the World Economic Forum is their initiative on future shocks. And what they have developed is you can navigate on their website 10 different future scenarios and how they will look like if we take different paths. And also they develop a story that is like a short novel talking about AIs and something like Tinder and AI and how that can present like a risk for society. And it's very interesting, and I really recommend you to read it. And the third figure is actually an initiative that we have in-house for the bioengineering scientific article that I mentioned before about the bioengineering issues that are going to be relevant from 5 to 15 years. And we have partnered with artists, and we have developed a 3 pages comic that talks about these, again, future scenarios. And with this, we want to engage our science to society, to bring science closer to society and to let them know that there are some issues that are important and relevant and they should know about. Of course, the comic is the first presentation that we give them, but we really hope that they invite us to talk into their universities, invite us to talk about these issues at the governments, at the local governments, national governments, international governments. And I think that we need to keep thinking about what do we need to do in order to capture the attention of the people that we really want to catch and involve in our conversations in policy and science and so on. So finally, my concluding remarks will be that please see us, in this case, my institution, but I will say the whole scientific community as allies for citizens, for civil society, for civil servants, policymakers, the industry, because we want to work together with you. We want to co-design, to co-create, and to co-deliver knowledge. So please reach out to us and we will be here waiting. And we are also making our own efforts to reach to you. So I wish you a very good discussion and all the best for this year Biological Weapon Convention meeting of experts. Thank you.